It's always a great show when you have a great guest, and I've been waiting for this, the 10 most dangerous toys this Christmas. And I got an expert for you guys, lawyer, Professor Joe Montanile. Thanks, pal. Thanks for coming in. So glad to have you. And you studied this, you looked at this, and you said, this is what I want to talk about. Now, you're a dad.
Yes.
Is this something that perhaps kind of hit your dad chord?
Well, unquestionably. You know, I think when you're dealing with toys and products liability, that one of the things I always say to people is that as a lawyer, as a plaintiff's lawyer in particular, that I have the misfortune of only seeing the 1 in 10,000 times things go wrong, as opposed to the 9,999 times they go right. So with toy products, every time I walk through a store, I see a potential issue. And it doesn't matter what product it is, I always view them as dangerous. So the great thing about this list is that they are really identifying the truly dangerous products that are out there this Christmas.
And it's amazing. Now, I come from a different perspective. I'm not a dad. I am married to a very nice lady who's a mom who has children and grandchildren. As we had mentioned earlier, I was at a popular store last night in the whole Christmas madness and just seeing stacks of things and just boggles the mind. There's just so many things. And my first thought is, who looked at this stuff? Is it safe? Is it not safe? Is it toxic? Is it going to break? Is a child going to chomp on it?
The real problem is that when you ultimately learn that a product is defective, more often than not, it's because harm has already occurred. The product makes its way into the market, it's used, it's consumed, and sometimes it's literally consumed by children. They eat it, they aspirate, they digest magnets. There's a whole host of products in here that discuss that are relevant to that. But you often don't learn, more often than not, you don't learn that a product is defective until the defect causes some harm to children, and more often than not, to several children. So it's a situation where you learn after the fact. Unfortunately, a lot of product manufacturers know before the fact that their products are defective, and they do nothing about it. They sort of turn a blind eye to the problem, hoping that it doesn't happen, or, as we've seen in the past with many manufacturers, larger manufacturers, auto manufacturers for that matter, they will run the risk that the harm that's caused will be less than the actual recalling of the product. So if they have to pay out on a claim, those claims are actuarials will grind the numbers and figure out, well, is it going to be less expensive for us to pay out on the claim, or is it less expensive to recall the product? And they'll just make a cost-benefit decision as to which is the course of action they're going to follow.
What an age we live in.
Yeah.
But you have researched and you have brought these toys to us, and I read this thing, I don't know whether to, I'm certainly not going to laugh, but I don't know whether to cry or scream. Leading off in the leadoff position is this toy called the Airstorm FireTech Bow. And I mean, to me it looks dangerous. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, sure. Well, right off the bat, the name has to be a clue to you as a parent as to whether or not it's something that you should actually buy for your child. I mean, Airstorm Bow, obviously it's going to have a projectile. Projectiles can cause harm, and if it has any type of force whatsoever to it, it potentially can cause serious harm. I can tell you from personal experience that even with something like a Nerf gun that everybody buys for the children, I bought it for my son, that you think is totally safe, he suffered an eye injury from it. Something like this now takes it to the next level. This is actually now, there's a potential for a puncture injury. So you not only have potential for eye injury, but you also have potential for puncture injury of the skin, whatever it happens to be. This is a toy that just by looking at it really is not a toy. It's a weapon, and as a parent, you have to use common sense that when you see something like this, that you're going to try to stay away from it. Now, the comment here on this one was interesting because they say that the warning in the product says that you shouldn't pull back all the way on it, only pull back halfway, and don't point it at the face, because obviously that's where the majority of the harm will occur, or the greatest degree of harm. Well, that's all well and good, but how many children read warnings? How many children follow warnings?
Rip the packet.
How many parents read warnings? Okay, so now you have parents that, even if they do read the warning and they pass it on to the child, okay, so little Johnny's playing with his toy bow and arrow, and he's, like they mentioned, that, you know, the Hunger Games really is what caused the sales to spike on this particular toy. He wants to recreate that. Okay, and now he's playing with his friend who did not get the warning from the parent, or maybe a younger sibling. And what winds up happening is, even if they did get the warning, for a child to be able to hold the product, manipulate it, to use it, and to use it accurately becomes, really it's a gamble. And so toys like this, again, common sense, you should just stay away from them.
Now, you raise an interesting point. You're a plaintiff's attorney, you're a law professor, and you're driving down the road, you have they don't have like classic top 40 stations anymore, but let's just say like a popular music station, and the DJs will get on and they'll have a segment that's called Stupid Warnings on Packages. Don't fold the baby carriage with the baby inside. Ha ha, he he. You mentioned these warnings. And your experience with the warnings. The warning's there, parent doesn't look at it, kid goes out, buys the AirTech Fire bow, does something. Can the manufacturer come into court and claim, well, hey, the warning was there, they just didn't read it?
No question about it, and it's the reason it's there.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of it is, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, products didn't come with warnings. They just manufactured a product and they sold it. The warnings came about because of lawsuits. The whole warnings, the area of the law developed as a consequence of lawsuits. We're seeing the pendulum swing the other way, where there's actually over-warning now, where you can, if you fold down the visor in your car, there are warnings in the visor. Who is reading them? We are now being over-warned, and there's simplicity to warnings too. And I teach my students all the time that, and I think that this pertains to what we're talking about, that you don't need a warning on a knife. A knife is dangerous.
It's sharp and can hurt you.
Right. It's the same thing when you're talking about a toy like this, that it's common sense. You really need to use common sense. And I'm not just talking as a lawyer, I'm talking as a parent, that there are common sense aspects to this that you need to understand. But in terms of the warnings, and obviously a manufacturer, I've defended automobile manufacturers and a variety of other product manufacturers. Your defense is, here's our warning, it's explicit, it's clear, it meets all the relevant standards for warnings, and this is how we're going to defend the case. Then, again, what I was talking about before is, well, how do you extend that warning now to the next potential user in the line of users?
That's a very good point.
So, is it just an in-package label that you want to put in from a manufacturer's standpoint? Okay, well now maybe you need an on-product. But you can't put all of those warnings necessarily on a small product. So you have to then sort of synthesize out the more important warnings and put those on the product. So it becomes a balancing act for the manufacturers as to what they're going to do in order to try to warn. The question becomes, does a product like this, because in products liability you're dealing with risk-utility balancing. What is the utility of the product, and is it outweighed by the risk? So a product like this, you have to ask yourself, is there really a utility to this product that outweighs its risk? This isn't a learning toy. This isn't a toy where it will help with the motor skills of a young child. This is a toy where children are just going to try to mimic a popular movie and potentially harm each other.
I just sit and believe me, it's like the Christmas spirit, at least in my estimation, will take a beating as time goes on, or it'll beat down. It starts earlier this season, and it just goes.
It started in the summer this year.
It probably did, or certainly at least late summer. Yeah, exactly, and it comes all the way down. So by the time goes on, it's like a time is there. All right, let's just get the toys out and do it. And I'm just thinking to myself, to see some poor kid get hurt on Christmas Day and hurt badly. I mean, this is really serious stuff.
Yeah, well, my son's eye injury occurred on Christmas Day, playing with a toy that somebody had received that day at a friend's house.
So you really have a dog in this fight. I can see that.
Yeah. Thankfully he's fine, but it was certainly something that could have been a lot worse than it was.
Interesting.
And if
not in a good way, but very interesting.
There was statistics are that there were 90, I believe 90 children have been killed by toys. 90 children under the age of 15 have been killed by toys
Wow.
between 2001 and 2012. Toys,
It's 90 too many.
yes.
It's 90 too many. That's horrible. Wow, aren't you glad you're seeing this? This is information we need to know about. Let's look at number 2. Now, to me, this is the Radio Flyer Ziggle. And I see a really nice picture of kids smiling and having fun. And what's being a child all about? And ain't this great? You're going to tell us something that probably people that have bought that do not want to hear.
Absolutely. This is actually one of my favorites for a variety of reasons. One is I love the advertisement on the box, and one of the things I stress with my students all the time is the role of advertisements now in products. To what extent have advertisers now potentially insinuated themselves into the product liability stream of commerce? In typical products liability, you're dealing with a manufacturer, a wholesaler, and a retailer. And in most states, all of them stand in the same shoes as the other in terms of potential liability. I think when you look at a product like this and the packaging, that now the advertisers may be working themselves into this. Whether or not they owe a
Interesting
duty,
concept.
whether or not they owe a duty to the general public is another issue. They probably do not. But if you take a look at this box, and this works in the warnings issues as well, the package on it shows a little boy riding this scooter, and there's somebody behind him, another child behind him on a scooter. Neither of them are wearing a helmet. Now, an advertiser put this together, and it was obviously approved by the manufacturer for display on the box. However, the warnings on the inside of the package warn that children should be wearing helmets while riding it. However, the box doesn't show that. So now if you're dealing with children, that are 3 to 8, I believe is the age
Right.
recommendation.
Young children.
They're not going to read the warnings. They will look at the box though. And when they look at that box, they're going to see that the kid on the box is not wearing a helmet. Now, if their parent says to them, parents admonish their children every day, multiple times a day, with regard to a variety of different things. So, a parent will say, wear your helmet when you ride this. Okay, that goes in one ear and directly out the next. So if you're not standing there and monitoring your child 24/7, which I don't know any parent that does, when your son or daughter gets on this particular item, either they may think, I should wear a helmet,
Right.
and just decide not to, or may just forget. Not to mention their friends may come over and also ride it. So from an advertising perspective and a marketing perspective, this is extremely poorly thought out. And actually, it may not be. It may have been intended to be this way, and I think probably it was. There was probably, if you put a helmet on a child in this, one, children are going to think, I don't really want to ride it because I don't want to have to wear a helmet. And number two, it doesn't look as good. Just from
Right.
a purely aesthetic quality to the ad, it just doesn't look as good.
Well, and you and I had a discussion before we were on about toys coming into this country from foreign lands.
Yes.
And the fact that very little manufacturing is done in the U.S. today, under U.S. standards. These things just show up here, and some get through and some don't, and a lot gets sold. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Sure, there's a huge number of products, toys, that are being manufactured overseas. We do have federal regulations with regard to chemicals that are permissible levels of certain chemicals in products, some that aren't allowed in at all. The standards in foreign nations, there are no standards in a lot of foreign nations, and they certainly don't meet the standards that we have. And if you take a walk through any toy store, you're going to see thousands upon thousands of different toys. They're coming from all over the world.
Yeah.
And it is virtually impossible for the Consumer Product Safety Commission, who governs the standards for toys, to monitor.
To police every single toy.
Absolutely. And so they literally will be showing up at ports now when they learn of a toy that maybe has lead in it or arsenic that will, if a child puts it in the mouth, will leach into the child's body. They're seizing these toys at ports now. But many of them are making their way into this country and being sold on the shelves of reputable toy stores. So you may think that if you can't think, in fact, if you're a parent, that when you walk into a toy store, such as Toys R Us, or if you walk into a Walmart or whatever, that the toys on their shelves are necessarily safe. You have got to be diligent as a parent, and you have got to examine the product, and you've got to use common sense.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and you know, this is what people need to do, and they don't do nearly enough of. I'd like to talk about number 3, this catapencil. We've got a few minutes to the break, and this one made me nervous, and you're going to tell me why.
Well, it's basically a slingshot pencil. It's
Oh yeah. Have you ever sat in a classroom? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And again, it's a common sense thing that you really don't need a child with a device that can launch projectiles. And what it's going to do is it's just simply going to harm someone. You know, you can, as a parent, then you can go onto the CPSC's website and you can look at products that are being investigated or recalled. And certainly, I think that if you have any kind of doubt whatsoever as to whether or not your product, the product you're about to toy you're about to buy for your child, is one that may cause harm, you certainly should do that. I think you should do it almost all the time anyway. Just check the CPSC's website. It takes 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They have a menu bar for recall products. You can take a look at it. You'll see what's out there, what's being recalled. You'll know what not to buy. But by the same token, even if you don't, just use your common sense.
With anything, any projectile type.
Yeah. If it hits a child in the eye, it could potentially cause blindness, and it does. Last year, there were 265,000 visits to the emergency room for toy-related injuries to children.
That's staggering. That's absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
That is insane. Let's do one other before the break. This, to me, number 4, this actually looks harmless on its face. I see a baby, the rock and stack pull toy. I see little cartoonish type figures, and I'm, what's so bad about this?
You know, when you look at it, it looks like a perfectly good toy. You think to yourself, wow, this is great. You know, my child or my nephew, my niece, my friend's daughter or son may want this. It looks like it's going to help with fine motor skills for the age appropriateness of it. However, it's the long cord that's in the front of it. It's 20 inches long. If you have a cord that is that long, or close to being that long even, it poses a potential strangulation risk.
You're right.
Also, the other concern is most concerns for children's toys. The majority of the hazards and injuries that result are from ingested parts, small parts. And even a string like this you have to be careful with, because if it becomes detached, a child will swallow it. So these are all, you know, ingestion is a major concern, but strangulation with this toy is a definite concern. A 20-inch cord is way too long.
What little did we know until we invited our guest, and we have many more. Actually, we're going to have 6 more to show you. Tony DeAngelo and Joe Montanile on Connecticut Morning. A retromercial first, and back with Joe in a bit. Thanks for being with us.